This is as close to a dark and stormy night as we're going to get now that it's spring, and I just thought I needed a lantern and my traveling coat to make a way to a nice evening in front of the fireplace. So welcome to you all. Sorry you can't see my face. I'm going to set my lantern down because now that I'm inside. And for the children, we've been reading The Little Lame Prince in his traveling cloak. And this is as close to a traveling cloak as you'll get. And it's old and wonderful, and it's from Austria, and I just thought I would dress up for the occasion tonight. So welcome all of you. I will take my coat off and be comfortable and be right with you. The court orchestra has been kindly welcoming me home, and my walking stick is here in case I need to get up during the program. And as usual, I'm equipped. My walking stick has a sword in it. So any brigands or criminals on the street, I can take care of them. So I'm prepared now that I'm home. I can defend myself in my own lair, my own castle. So now I'm going to dismiss the court musicians and we'll get on with the program. Thank you, court musicians. I'm so glad that you were here and to welcome me, but now it's time to sit down and read, and I see that Punky here has gotten really comfortable. So, Punky, you're going to have to move because we're going to have to read. You can come back if you want, but come on. Thank you. Thank you, Punky. You can sit there and listen along with everyone else. So one of the things I've been thinking about tonight, I dressed up for the occasion, is what makes a great novel. And there are a couple of cliches which have a lot to do with great works of writing. And the reason I dressed up this way is that the joke is every mystery story starts with "it was a dark and stormy night." This is as close to a dark and stormy night as we're going to get from now until winter. But coronavirus is a dark and stormy night that we're in the middle of, a nightmare, which will continue and is continuing. The other is the devil is in the details. That's always been said about good writing, about good everything. And for Lewis and The Horse and His Boy, or any of his writings, the devil is in the details really wonderfully. And they're visually exciting. Tonight is one of the most exciting chapters, and we'll be getting started on that in a minute. I was going to get rid of that. That's not right. We're going to start reading that in just a moment. But as you listen to the story tonight, and especially the pond, the pool, where this visitor looks and sees things about what's going on, put on your thinking cap. I know you're all inside. You're not going anywhere. That's where we all are. And try to pick out the devil in the details in terms of how similar his magic pool is to our TV, especially color TV. As he describes the pool, you could say almost that Lewis thought of early black and white TV. I don't know if he ever got to color TV or not, but in any case, it's very, very interesting, and I want for you to do that. It'll make the story more interesting, and I just love having you all here, and it's so great to be at home with you. And so we'll start in just a moment. I lit a candle, even though we have electricity, because all good reading has to be done by candlelight, whether it's writing or reading, if we're back in another century. So I picked an appropriate wine. I don't have the bottle tonight, but it's called 19 Crimes. So we can think about how many crimes there are with the people in these battles. Who's the evil one? Who's the good one? So there's a lot more than 19. But to your health and to this evening. By the way, 19 Crimes is good inexpensive wine. You can get it most places. So tonight we're reading chapter 13, The Fight at Anbard. Here we go. By about 11 o'clock, the whole company was once more on the march, riding westward with the mountains on their left. Corin and Shasta rode right at the rear with the giants immediately in front of them. Lucy and Edmund, excuse me, it's getting cool in here, even though I have a fire. I'm going to put this over my legs, kind of warm up, make it cozy for me. Corin and Shasta rode right out to the rear with the giants immediately in front of them. Lucy and Edmund and Peridin were busy with their plans for the battle, and though Lucy once said, "But where is his goose-cap, Highness?" Edmund only replied, "Not in the front. That's good news enough. Leave well enough alone." Shasta told Corin most of his adventures and explained that he had learned all his riding from a horse and didn't really know how to use the reins. Corin instructed him in this, besides telling him all about their secret sailing from Tashbaan. "And where is the Queen Susan?" "At Paravel," said Corin. "She's not like Lucy, you know, who's as good as a man, or at any rate as good as a boy. Queen Susan is more like an ordinary grown-up lady, and she doesn't ride to the wars, though she is an excellent archer." The hillside path which they were following became narrower all the time, and the drop on their right hand became steeper. At last they were going in single file along the edge of the precipice, and Shasta shuddered to think that he had done the same last night without knowing it. "But of course," he said, "I was quite safe. That is why the lion kept on my left. He was between me and the edge all the time." Then the path went left and south away from the cliff, and there were thick woods on both sides of it, and they went steeply up and up into the pass. There would have been a splendid view from the top of it if it were open ground. But among all those trees you could see nothing. Only every now and then a huge pinnacle of rock above the treetops, and an eagle or two wheeling high up in the blue air. "They smell battles," said Corin, pointing at the birds. "They know we're preparing a feed for them." Shasta didn't like this at all. When they had crossed the neck of the pass and came to a good deal lower, they reached more open ground, and from here Shasta could see all of Archenland, blue and hazy, spread out below him, and even, he thought, a hint of the desert beyond it. But the sun, which had perhaps 2 hours or so to go before it set, was in his eyes, and he couldn't make things out very distinctly. Here the army halted and spread out in a line, and there was a great deal of rearranging. A whole detachment of very dangerous-looking talking beasts whom Shasta had not noticed before, and who were mostly of the cat kind, leopards, panthers, and the like, went padding and growling to take up their positions on the left. The giants were ordered to the right, and before going there, they all took off something they'd been carrying on their backs and sat down for a moment. Then Shasta saw what they had been carrying and were now putting on were their boots, were pairs of their boots, horrid, heavy, spiked boots which came up to their knees. Then they sloped their huge clubs over their shoulders and marched to their battle positions. The archers with Queen Lucy fell to the rear, and you could first see them bending their bows and then hear the twang, twang as they tested the strings. And wherever you looked, you could see people tightening girths, putting on helmets, drawing swords, throwing cloaks to the ground. There was hardly any talking now. It was very solemn and very dreadful. "I'm in for it now. I really am in for it now," thought Shasta. Then there came noises far ahead, the sound of many men shouting and a steady thud, thud, thud. "Battering ram," whispered Corin. "They're battering the gate." Even Corin looked quite serious now. "Why doesn't King Edmund get on?" he said. "I can't stand this waiting about. It's chilly, too." Shasta nodded, hoping he didn't look as frightened as he felt. The trumpet at last. On the move now trotting, the banner streaming out in the wind. They had topped a low ridge now, and below them the whole scene suddenly opened out, a little many-towered castle with its gate toward them. No moat, unfortunately, but of course the gate shut and the portcullis down. On the walls they could see like little white dots the faces of the defenders. Down below, about 50 of the Calormenes dismounted were steadily swinging on a great tree trunk against the gate. But at once the scene changed. The main bulk of Rabadash's men had been on foot, ready to assault the gate, but now he had seen the Narnians sweeping down from the ridge. There is no doubt those Calormenes are wonderfully trained. It seemed to Shasta only a second before a whole line of the enemy were on horseback again, wheeling round to meet them, swinging toward them. And now galloped. The ground between the two armies grew less every moment, faster, faster. All swords out now, all shields up to the nose, all prayers said, all teeth clenched. Shasta was dreadfully frightened, but it suddenly came into his head. If you funk this, you'll funk every battle all your life, now or never. But when at last the two lines met, he had really very little idea of what happened. There was a frightful confusion and an appalling noise. His sword was His sword was knocked clean out of his hands pretty soon, and he got the reins tangled somehow. Then he found himself slipping, then a spear came straight at him, and as he ducked to avoid it, he rolled right off his horse, bashed his left knuckles terribly against someone else's armor, and then, but it's no use trying to describe the battle from Shasta's point of view. He understood too little of the fight in general, and even of his own part in it. The best I can tell you what really happened is to take you some miles away where the hermit of the southern march sat gazing into the smooth pool beneath the spreading tree, with Bree and Hwin and Erebus beside him. For it was in this pool that the hermit looked when he wanted to know what was going on in the world outside. In the world outside the green walls of his hermitage. A bit like TV. Then, as in a mirror, he could see at certain times what was going on in the streets of cities far further south than Tashbaan, or what ships were putting into Red Haven in the remote Seven Isles, or what robbers or wild beasts stirred in the great western forest between Lantern Waste and Telmar. And all this day he had hardly left his pool, even to eat or drink, for he knew the great events were afoot in Archenland. Erebus and the horses gazed into it too. They could see it was a magic pool. Instead of reflecting the tree and the sky, it revealed cloudy and colored shapes moving, always moving in its depths. They could see nothing clearly. The hermit could, and from time to time he told them what he saw. A little while before Shasta rode into his first battle, the hermit had begun speaking like this. Excuse me, I'm going to take a drink. This is getting exciting. I see 1, 2, 3 eagles wheeling in the gap by Stormness Head. One is the oldest of all eagles. He would not be out unless battle was at hand. I see him wheel to and fro, peering down sometimes at Anvord, sometimes to the east, behind Stormness. Ah, I see now what Rabadash and his men have been so busy at all day. They have felled and lopped a great tree. They are now coming out of the woods, carrying it as a ram. They have learned something from the failure of the last night's assault. He would have been wiser, I think, if he had set these men to making ladders, but it takes too long, and he is impatient, fool that he is. He ought to have ridden back to Tashbaan as soon as the first attack failed, for his whole plan depended on speed and surprise. Now they are bringing their ram into position. King Lun's men are shooting hard from the walls. 5 Calormenes have fallen, but not many will. They have their shields above their heads. Rabadash is giving his orders now. With him are his most trusted lords, fierce Tarkans from the eastern provinces. I can see their faces. There is Corridon of Castle Tormont, and Azru, and Kalmash, and Igelmouth of the twisted lip, and tall Tarkan with a crimson beard. The devil is in the details, huh? By the main, my old master Anradin, said Bree. Shh, said Erebus. Now the ram has started. If I could hear as well as see, what a noise that would make, stroke after stroke, and no gate can stand it forever. But wait, something up by Stormness has scared the birds. They're coming out in masses. And wait again, I can't see yet. Ah, now I can. The whole ridge up on the east is black with horsemen. If only the wind would catch that standard and spread it out. They're over the ridge now, whoever they are. Aha, I've seen the banner now. Narnia. Narnia! It's the Red Lion. They're in full career down the hill now. I can see King Edmund. There's a woman behind among the archers. Oh. Oh. What is it? Asked Gwyn breathlessly. All his cats are dashing out from the left of the line. Cats, said Erebus. Great cats, leopards and such, said the hermit impatiently. I see, the cats are coming round in a circle to get at the horses of the dismounted men. A good stroke. The Calormene horses are mad with terror already. Now the cats are in among them. But Rabadash has reformed his line in 100 men in the saddle, has 100 men in the saddle. They're riding to meet the Narnians. There are only 100 yards between the two lines now. Now only 50. I can see King Edmund. I can see the Lord Peridon. There are two mere children at the Narnian line. What can the king be about to let them into battle? Only 10 yards. The lines have met. The giants on the Narnian right are doing wonders, but one's down. Shot through the eye, I suppose. The center's all in a muddle. I can see more on the left. There are two boys again. Lion alive. One is Prince Corin. The other, like him, as two peas. It's your little Shasta. Corin is fighting like a man. He's killed a Calormene. I can see a bit of the center now. Rabadash and Edmund almost met then, but the press has separated them. What about Shasta, said Erebus. Oh, the fool, groaned the hermit. Poor brave little fool. He knows nothing about this work. He's making no use at all of his shield, his whole side's exposed. He hasn't the faintest idea what to do with his sword. Oh, he's remembered it now. He's waving it wildly about, nearly cut off his own pony's head. And he will in a moment if he's not careful. He will in a moment if he's not careful. Oh, it's been knocked out of his hand now. It's mere murder sending a child into the battle. He can't live 5 minutes. Duck, you fool. Duck, you fool. Oh, he's down. Killed? Asked 3 voices breathlessly. How can I tell? Said the hermit. The cats have done their work. All the riderless horses are dead or escaped now. No retreat for the Calormenes on them. Now the cats are turning back into the main battle. They're leaping on the ramsmen. The ram is down. Oh, good, good. The gates are opening from the inside. There's going to be a sortie. Oh, Oh, the first three are out. It's King Lune in the middle, the brothers Dar and Daran on each side of him. Behind them are Tran, Shar, and Kol with his brother Colin. There are 10, 20, nearly 30 of them out by now. The Calormene line is being forced back upon them. King Edmund is dealing marvelous strokes. He's just slashed Corridon's head off. Lots of Calormenes have thrown down their arms and are running for the woods. Those that remain are hard pressed. The giants are closing in on the right, Cats on the left, King Lune from the rear. The Calormenes are a little knot now, fighting back to back. Your Tarkans down, Bree. Lune and Azra are fighting hand to hand. The king looks like winning. The king is keeping it up well, and the king has won. Azra's down. King Edmund's down. No, he's up again. He's at it with Rabadash. They're fighting in the very gate of the castle. Now, several Calormenes have surrendered. Daran has killed Ilgamuth. I can't see what happened to Rabadash. I think he's dead, leaning against the castle wall, but I don't know. Calamash and King Edmund are still fighting, but the battle is over everywhere else. Calamash has surrendered. Oh, the battle is over. The Calormenes are utterly defeated. When Shasta fell off of his horse, he gave himself up for lost. But horses, even in battle, tread on human beings very much less than you would suppose. And after a very horrible 10 minutes or so, Shasta realized suddenly that there were no longer any horses stamping about in the immediate neighborhood. And the noise, for where there were still a good many noises going on, was no longer that of a battle. He sat up and stared about him. Even he, little as he knew of battles, could soon see that Archenlanders and Narnians had won. The only living Calormenes he could see were prisoners. The castle gates were wide open, and King Lune and King Edmund were shaking hands across the battering ram. From the circles of lords and warriors around them, there arose a sound of breathless and excited, but obviously cheerful conversation. And then suddenly, it all united and swelled into a great roar of laughter. Shasta picked himself up, feeling uncommonly stiff, and ran toward the sound to see what the joke was. A very curious sight met his eyes. The unfortunate Rabadash appeared to be suspended from the castle walls. His feet, which were about 2 feet from the ground, were kicking wildly. His chain shirt was somehow hitched up so that it was horribly tight under the arms and came halfway over his face. In fact, he looked just as a man looks if you catch him in the very act of getting into a stiff shirt that is a little too small for him. The stiff shirt I have on tonight used to be too small for me, but it fits now. As far as he could be made out afterward. And you may sure the story was well talked over for many a day. What happened was something like this. Early in the battle, one of the giants had made an unsuccessful stamp at Rabadash with his spiked boot. Unsuccessful because it didn't crush Rabadash, which is what the giant had intended. But not quite useless because one of the spikes tore the chainmail, just as you or might tear an ordinary shirt. Have you ever done that? Like you have a favorite shirt that's kind of old and you catch it on something and then it tears and then you have to throw it away. It's always sad because it's usually your favorite shirt. So Rabadash, by the time he encountered Edmund at the gate, had a hole in the back of his hauberk. And when Edmund pressed him back nearer and nearer to the wall, he jumped up on a mounting block and stood there, raining down blows on Edmund from above. But then finding that this position, by raising him above the heads of everyone else, made him a mark for every arrow from the Narnian bows, he decided to jump down again. And he meant to look and sound, no doubt, for a moment. He meant to look and sound, No doubt for a moment he did look and sound very grand and very dreadful as he jumped, crying, "The Holt of Cash falls from above." But he had to jump sideways because the crowd in front of him left him no landing place in that direction. And then, in the neatest way you could wish, the tear in the back of his hauberk caught on a hook in the wall. Ages ago, this hook had a ring in it for tying horses to. And there he found himself like a piece of washing, hung up to dry, with everyone laughing at him. "Let me down," Edmund howled Rabadash. "Let me down and fight me like a king and a man. Or if you were too great a coward to do that, kill me at once." "Certainly," began King Edmund. But King Lune interrupted. "By your Majesty's good leave," said King Lune to Edmund, "not so." Then returning to Rabadash, he said, "Your Royal Highness, if you had given that challenge a week ago, I'd answer it, for there was no one in King Edmund's dominion, from the High King down to the smallest talking mouse, who would have refused it. But by attacking our castle at Ambert in time of peace without defiance sent, you have proved yourself no knight, but a traitor, one rather to be whipped by the hangman than to be suffered to cross swords with any person of honor. Take him down, bind him, and carry him within till all our pleasure is further known." Strong hands wrenched Rabadash's sword from him, and he was carried away into the castle, shouting, threatening, cursing, and even crying. For though he could have faced torture, he could not bear being made ridiculous. In Tashbaan, everyone had always taken him seriously. At that moment, Coran ran up to Shasta, seizing his hand, and started dragging him toward King Lune. "Here he is, father, here he is," cried Coran. "Aye, and here thou art, at last," said the king in a very gruff voice. "And hast been in the battle clean contrary to your obedience. A boy to break your father's heart. At your age, a rod to your breech were fitter than a sword in your fist. Ha!" But everyone, including Coran, could see that the king was very proud of him. "Chide him no more, sire, if it please you," said Lord Darham. "His Highness would not be your son if he did not inherit your conditions. It would grieve your Majesty more if he had to be reproved for the opposite fault." "Well, well," grumbled the king, "we'll pass it over this time. And now..." And what came next surprised Shasta as much as anything that had happened to him in his life. He found himself suddenly embraced in a bear-like hug by King Lune and kissed on both cheeks. Then the king sat him down again and said, "Stand here together, boys, and let all the court see you. Hold up your heads now, gentlemen, look at them both. Has any man any doubts?" And still Shasta could not understand why everyone was staring at him and at Coran, or what all the cheering was about. Well, thus endeth the story. We'll have to continue tomorrow night with chapter 14, how Bree became a wiser horse. That will be very exciting. I'm glad you're with me, and again, there are things within the details that Lewis writes that relate to our present experience. I was thinking at the end about the awkwardness of receiving a kiss from the father, and how in the coronavirus crisis we have been isolated from human contact and touch. I've said this before, but I'm thinking again tonight, this is going to be a long-term thing, and a little like either looking at television and the news, or a little like our present condition. I was talking to Abigail, who's a nurse, and she said that there's a woman who was in the hospital who got the virus. She had a newborn baby, and she died today, and never got to see her baby. She has 4 other children left with her husband. And the good news is they've raised almost $100,000 to help this poor family. The other is that Abigail said, and I think we're in for a really long haul and we need to prepare for it, that the testing is not accurate. There was a woman who was tested 9 times and she was negative for it, and then finally it was positive and she died. So we're not out of the woods at all. We're not out of the battle. We're in the middle of the battle. And I think we need to take it seriously. I'm going to end with something that I've showed you before, but I really want to talk about it tonight because I think it's really a symbolic object lesson for where we are in our lives and where we are as a country and where we are as a family in each of our families and the way our lives have been and where they are now. And I think, if truth be told, whatever we come to, even if it's a month from now or a year from now or whatever it would be, nothing will ever be the same. As we talked the other night, this is a little bit like a combination of the Spanish flu and depression all at the same time. And I'm going to show you something now. And an example of what this means. First, I'm going to show you a photo. This is a photo of Twyla and me when we were expecting Rachel. And the portrait that you see over the mantel in the dining room was painted of Twyla at this moment. And the portrait was for our 5th anniversary, and when we started commissioning the portrait, we found out that we were expecting our first daughter. And so I just wanted you to see this, because this is relevant to what I'm going to show you next. So that was us and dreams for our future and our life as it was lived before Twyla passed away. And again, up until she was ill, this is kind of the way we saw our life. And this is the way we see our lives before the coronavirus. This is a portrait of Rachel, who was conceived and was born after that photo. That photo was us, some really dear friends, Eric Weichart and Greg Mitchell, rented a limousine because we were leaving from New York to go to Ireland on this dream trip. And if you're pregnant, Ireland's the best place to go. Everybody greets you and congratulates you and treats you like Mary, and it has the pregnant woman sit down and wait for the taxi or whatever. Anyway, they surprised and greeted us at the train station on their bikes, and then proceeded to take us out into a limousine, and we had to drive around the limousine, in the limousine around Manhattan with a wet bar and everything else. It was really a lot of fun. And then the next day we went off to Ireland. This is my daughter Rachel when she was 16. This is, it's the age where all your hopes and dreams for your children and your own dreams of yourself for what your life will be like. This is what I would say the picture of our lives were before Twyla's illness and before other things happened. There were many crises, and there were struggles, but this would be what I would have said is our life up until then. This is what most of us see our lives up till now. Most of us say, well, normal life. Normal life means predictability. We have the right clubs to go to. We know where we go to church. We know where to go shopping. We know that we can always go to our favorite restaurant because they've been there forever. We know where to get a massage. We can go whenever we want. Personal choice and freedom is something that is now very limited and will be for a very long time. So this is the portrait, like I was talking to a friend the other day. Well, this is my life and we're not back to it yet. And I said it'll never go back. And I'm repeating what I said the other night. That there is no such thing as normal, and new normal does not describe where we are and where we're about to go. Is this looking to me with the inaccurate tests and everything, it may be up to a year before this is really finalized. And even if we go back to work next month, there's the problem of what kind of mask do you wear, what kind should you wear, who's at risk. Like this woman in her 30s was at risk and she didn't know it and infected a whole bunch of people. And as I saw, the first person that died from coronavirus was in her 40s. She was young and healthy. but there were no symptoms. And that's what's happening now. There are people showing up, and these tests are inaccurate, and so sometimes they test negative, and they actually are positive. Positive with no symptoms. It's a scary disease, and until we get a cure, we are really in danger, especially people my age, and people, and I'm fortunate because I have a family, and I have wonderful friends, neighbors in my church where I'm artist in residence. So as artist in residence, I'm showing this and using this as an object lesson. So this is how we see our life. Now, this is the way we think our lives look now. It's chaos and abstract color. This painting was done by Marguerite Slocum Quinn, a really wonderful portrait painter. And as I said the other day, I was reading a daily reading. It was talking about Vincent van Gogh, and they talked about how an artist can leave a painting unfinished. Marguerite Quinn, the reason this painting is so wonderful, this is a sketch. It was, I believe it was a sketch that later became the painting that is in, you've seen it, of Twyla and the Girls, when Rachel was about this age. It may have been a little bit later, but around that time. This is a brilliant painting, and as a dealer and representative of hers, I would very often have to say, Margie, you have to stop painting this now. You've worked it. You haven't worked it too much, but you can't work it too much. You can, and you need to stop. It's perfect as it is. So the devotional went on to read that, you know, it's not important for us to always get it perfectly. This is the way we think our life was, the old normal. We had a perfect life. We were in the right country clubs, we eat the right food, we run a lot, we have the right weather, we can control the weather with air conditioning and heat, we have plenty to eat, we have plenty of fuel, we have everything that we could need. We're really not in want. Now, there are people in want all over the world, but for us in America, to measure it, we have everything we need, no matter how poor we are. It's compared to the rest of the world, that's true. So, the devotional went on to say it's important to leave a painting unfinished, because when a painting's unfinished, it allows the artist to maybe someday go back to add a detail, and Margie's done that with some, and it was quite wonderful. But there's something else. Instead of trying to always get the picture perfect, an unfinished painting spurs an artist to do another painting, maybe on the same subject, and then a much more brilliant creation. This is the way we see God working in our life. We can't make it out. Like I think I showed you the needlepoint. Corrie ten Boom talked about a needlepoint. The back of the needlepoint with all the threads are how we see our lives, but in the front, God sees this, and this is what He's making us into. In the season we're in right now, it's the opposite. We think we have this, when actually it's this. And this is not a negative thing, it's a challenge. I think this has come about for each of us to be creative and to say, what will our new life be like? Will we not be watching TV so much? Will we not? I'm finding myself being resourceful with all kinds of things that I never thought I would do. And like my good friend Ed Nippers, who's a wonderful artist, which I'll be interviewing him in the next week or so, and it'll be on one of these posts, probably on a Sunday, maybe at tea time. He said, I have so many books, they're so wonderful, I've always loved having them around, and it's called my Someday Library. He said, today is someday. So he pulled a book which I'm dying to read. It's about the Belle Epic and how that period of history in Paris influenced the artist, and nearly all the famous artists, and Toulouse-Lautrec. Toulouse-Lautrec was injured in an accident when he was in the 30s. It's very much like the Little Lame Prince, if you've been following the story. But again, God challenges us to take our lives as they are right now and create something new. So do we need to go, like a friend of mine said, you know, why do we spend so much money having, say in a church, having youth pastors and a preacher and all this? He said, now that I've been at home for a while, I can survive quite well without it. Why do I need all that? And in fact, trying to do that is sort of like this. We want to we want to create a perfect picture to the outside world, to do what God's told us to do without doing it. We have a semblance of it without doing it sometimes, not all the time. When in fact, He's asked us to go down deep within and create what He's always wanted us to be and to do. Well, that's enough of that, and I love having you here, and I'm really thankful for the creativity and beauty that Marguerite Slocum Quinn has brought into the world, and many other artists who are in need. And now, again, as I've told the children, think of someone in need, whether it's someone with a disability, someone that's alone in an apartment, or like my daughter Rachel, who's not alone. She's with at least 10 or 12 other artists stuck in a studio in New York when this thing happened. And they have to be really resourceful and they can't leave. So it's a strange time we're living in, and it's a day-to-day battle just to survive. And I want to thank you all for listening and coming to be part of my program. I did have technical difficulties over the weekend, but I also had difficulties in myself because this isolation is really like a prison for me. A friend of mine said, well, we're both extroverts in different ways, and to be sheltered in place for an extrovert is like prison. I have other people that love being by themselves. They're introverts, and so this is just heaven for them. But this is hell for me. So I'm really glad that I can share my life with you all, and I will see you tomorrow night for the next chapter, and tea time. We'll be reading more of the Little Lame Prince. So thank you, and good night, and God bless. I'm not going back out. I'm sitting by the fire. It's been wonderful to have you here with me tonight, and hope you have a wonderful night. And please hug all your children and kiss them so they remember what it's like to be kissed and touched.